Montana Territory. Late October, 1881. The mornings had started to bite. Not hard yet, just enough to make breath show and turn the tops of water barrels cloudy with ice before sunrise. Wind slid down from the ridgeline and found every crack in the valley, making loose boards complain in the dark. That was when people noticed her, a woman alone setting heavy posts straight into frozen ground. Not beside her cabin, not behind it, but around it. Wagons slowed on the trail. A teamster reined up and stared long enough for his horses to blow steam. Someone laughed sharp and quick, the way people laugh when they don't know what else to do. Another shook his head and kept moving, embarrassed for her. She was framing something big, bigger than the cabin itself. And she was doing it backward, at least that's how it looked. A barn roof where livestock ought to be. A cabin left small and swallowed at the center like a mistake she forgot to fix. She's lost her sense, someone muttered. Should have built a proper house first, said another. A carpenter passing through town later would call it a rot trap waiting to happen. They didn't know her name yet, but they would. And by the spring of 1883, families scattered across 50 miles of territory would quietly copy the very thing they'd laughed at, because winter came, and winter kept records. Before we get there, before the numbers that shut the valley up take a second, if you care about the kind of frontier knowledge that wasn't written in books, only tested by cold and hunger, you'll want to stay with this. Subscribe. Drop a comment about where you're watching from, and tell me the coldest winter you've ever known. Now let me show you what she built and why it worked. Her name was Sarah Hendricks. She wasn't trying to challenge anyone. She was trying to survive. That spring, her husband had died in the field. A horse spooked while breaking new ground caught him wrong, and that was the end of it. No drama, no second chances, just a body carried back to a one-room log cabin and 2 children who didn't understand why their father wasn't coming home. Sarah was 32. Her daughter Mary was 9. Her son barely old enough to carry kindling without dropping half of it. The cabin itself was solid, 12 by 16 feet tight, stone footing a roof that didn't leak. Her husband had done that part right. But the woodshed and afterthought tacked onto the east wall was another story. A slanted lean-to with gaps wide enough to see daylight through. Fine in summer, useless once the weather turned, and September brought rain, cold rain. The kind that soaks slow and deep day after day until even season splits start to feel heavy. By early October, the entire woodpile was wet through. Not damp wet to the core. Sarah tried everything she knew. She dragged armloads inside and stacked them near the hearth. She split logs down smaller, hoping the centers might still be dry. She fed the stove, constantly choking it with smoke and frustration. Wet wood doesn't burn. It hisses. It smolders. It eats kindling and gives back nothing but smoke. And smoke in a one-room cabin with children isn't just unpleasant. It's dangerous. Winter in that valley didn't ask questions. Once it set in, it stayed. Snow ice weeks where the temperature never climbed back to 0. 5 months where heat meant the difference between sleeping and shivering through the night. Sarah didn't need a better stove. She didn't need more wood. She needed dry wood and a way to keep it dry all winter. She couldn't afford a separate barn. No money. No spare hands. The nearest neighbor had his own harvest to finish, and a newborn crying through the nights. Help was offered, but not enough to build something new from scratch. What she had was timber, stone, tools her husband had left behind, and time less of it every day. The idea didn't arrive like a revelation. It arrived like a narrowing of choices. If she couldn't protect the wood beside the cabin, She would protect it with the cabin. She wouldn't build two structures. She'd turn them into one. When she drove the first post into the ground, her daughter asked what they were making. A roof, Sarah said, setting her weight on the hammer. For the house. For the wood. That answer followed her for weeks. The plan was simple, even if the site of it wasn't. She left the cabin untouched walls, roof chimney door, all of it staying exactly where it was. Around it, she set 8 heavy posts, forming a rectangle roughly 24 by 30 feet, tall enough to leave open air above the cabin roof, wide enough to create space on every side. Then she framed a single roof over all of it, a steep gable to shed snow. Split shakes laid thick and tight seams sealed with pitch. One roof, one shelter. From a distance it looked wrong. A barn that forgot its purpose. A cabin swallowed by something larger than itself. People stopped to look. They always did. A neighbor rode over one afternoon, reins loose in his hands, studying the structure with careful concern. "What are you building, Sarah?" he asked. "A dry place," she said without stopping. "For what?" "For firewood." He watched her work for a long moment. He didn't argue. But doubt sat plainly on his face. Everyone could see it. By November, the talk had reached town, at the post office, at the dry goods counter. A respected carpenter warned aloud that stacking that much wood around a heat source would invite fire, or rot, or both. Someone joked that she'd freeze under a fancy roof, meant for nothing useful. The phrase spread fast, freezing in style. Sarah heard it. Through a visitor bringing bread, through a neighbor's wife lowering her voice out of kindness. She listened, nodded, and went back to work. By mid-November, the roof was tight. The stacks were rising. Cordwood lined the northeast and west sides, floor to beam. The south stayed mostly clear, so she could reach the door without climbing over her own fuel. The cabin sat at the center like a coal in ash, and then December arrived. The first snow fell on December 8th, 8 inches light and clean, the kind children remember fondly. It settled into drifts along fence lines and softened the world. Normal, manageable. 5 days later, the temperature dropped hard. 15 degrees overnight. Then another 10. Then rain. Cold rain in December is a curse. Snow can be brushed away. Rain finds its way in. It seeps under bark into cracks down to the heart of a split. For 3 days, freezing rain coated the valley, glazing everything in ice. When it finally stopped, the cold came back with teeth. 0, then 10 below, then worse. Cabins turned inward. Visits stopped. Families fed their stoves, constantly fighting smoke and damp heat. Wood piles that had looked fine under tarps were ruined. Fires took half an hour to catch and barely held once they did. 3 miles south, a man burned furniture to buy time. Another split frozen logs with bleeding hands searching for anything that would burn clean. And across the valley, one chimney told a different story. Thin smoke, gray, straight. On the 4th day of the deep freeze, William Caulfield noticed it while hauling wood. His own chimney belched thick white clouds, steam, and struggle. Hers didn't. Curiosity pushed him through knee-deep snow to her place. He told himself he was checking on a widow. The truth was simpler. The numbers weren't adding up. Sarah was outside when he arrived, pulling wood from the north stack under the big roof. Calm, unhurried. Inside the cabin was warm, not survivable, comfortable. 65, maybe more near the hearth. The fire burned clean, no hiss, no smoke. "Your wood's dry," William said. "It is." She explained it plainly. The shared roof kept weather off. Heat from the stove rose into the space above the cabin. Warm air moved upward and out through small gaps near the peak, carrying moisture with it. The wood didn't get hot. It got dry. She didn't own a moisture meter. She didn't need one. She knew by weight, by sound, by the way a split cracked clean instead of tearing. "How much are you burning?" he asked. "About half a cord every 6 days." William went still. He was burning nearly twice that and freezing. Over the worst stretch of cold, Sarah's cabin stayed between 62 and 68 degrees, while the outside sat 15 below. She slept through the night. Her fire held 8 hours banked with dry coals. By mid-January, she'd used 2.5 cords. Her neighbors used 5. Some more. That was the number that ended the laughter. Men rode out one by one, not to mock, to measure, to ask, to copy. By the next fall, roofs like hers dotted the valley, different shapes, same idea. Winter had passed judgment, and winter doesn't care how things look. The idea didn't spread with celebration. It spread quietly, the way practical things always do. One man copied the roof pitch, but left the sides open. Another wrapped only the north wall where storms came hardest. A third built a freestanding shed close enough to his cabin that the stovepipe warmed it just enough to pull moisture from the stacks. No two versions looked the same. Everyone worked better than what came before. They argued over what to call it: a woodshed wrap, a double roof, an envelope barn. Names didn't survive winter, results did. By the fall, after that hard December, you could ride the valley and spot them from a distance odd proportions, oversized roofs cabins, sitting small at the center of something bigger. New settlers asked why they were built that way. The answer was always practical, never poetic. So the wood stays dry, so the fire burns clean, so you don't wake up frozen at 3 in the morning. Even the carpenter who'd warned it would rot changed his tune. He never spoke about being wrong. He simply charged for building them. 4 in one season. Cash work. No lectures. Sarah didn't teach classes. She didn't write plans. She didn't stand in judgment of anyone who'd laughed. She just stacked her wood, banked her fire, and slept through nights other people spent feeding stoves. She wasn't smarter than her neighbors. She was just listening to the right things. Heat rises. Water steals energy. Winter exposes lies. Frontiers have always worked that way. They don't reward tradition. They don't care about appearances. They reward whatever keeps working when the temperature drops and the excuses run out. That's why these stories matter. Not because they're clever, but because they were tested when failure had consequences. If this kind of hard-won, frontier-tested knowledge is why you're here, you'll feel at home with Wildwood. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what the coldest winter you've ever faced taught you. Every week, we dig up one technique that wasn't theory, wasn't fashion, but survival. Educational note. This story is a historically inspired reconstruction. Characters' names and specific events are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. The physical principles described: heat movement, moisture control, and fuel efficiency are real and well established. Any modern application should follow current building codes, safety standards, and local regulations. This content is educational in nature and not professional, technical, or legal advice.